Every legend begins with a choice. Some are made in desperation, others in anger, but each one carries the weight of what could have been. The galaxy has always revolved around these moments, where a single decision can send ripples through time, altering the fate of countless lives. The Force, in its boundless complexity, does not dictate a single path. It presents crossroads, tests of will, moments where hesitation or resolve can shift the course of history. It is neither benevolent nor cruel, only a silent observer as the galaxy bends to the will of those strong enough to shape it. Many know the story of the Jedi and Sith, their endless war stretching across centuries. The names of Skywalker, Kenobi, Windu, and Palpatine are etched into history, their legacies defining the fate of entire civilizations. But what if their paths had twisted in unexpected ways? The Force does not see morality as the Jedi do, nor does it crave domination as the Sith believe. It offers power without preference, a tool waiting to be wielded. It watches as masters rise and fall, empires crumble, and heroes stand where villains once walked. The distinction between light and dark is not as clear as the Jedi once believed. Luke Skywalker could have embraced the dark side. In another reality, his loyalty to his friends might have given way to the hunger for power, his desperate need for belonging, turning him into the heir his father had always hoped for. The rebellion would have faced its greatest betrayal not from an imperial fleet, but from the very man they saw as their savior. In another moment, Palpatine might have stepped back from the abyss, using his vast intelligence and foresight to guide the Republic rather than corrupt it. A ruler not of shadows and manipulation, but of wisdom and unity. There is no single version of events that must unfold. Qui-Gon Jinn, a Jedi who often questioned the Council, might have found himself on a path that led not to enlightenment, but to darkness. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the most disciplined of Jedi, could have walked beside him, abandoning the rigid doctrines of the Order to forge a new code, one unrestrained by tradition. If Yoda had seen the Republic's inevitable decline and taken control instead of retreating into exile, the Jedi might have never fallen. The Sith would not have ruled, but would the galaxy have been any different under the iron hand of a master who understood both the light and the dark? Some would argue that destiny cannot be rewritten, that the Force ensures balance in its own way. But that balance is not static. It shifts with every decision, adapting to the will of those who can bend it. Anakin Skywalker's fall was never inevitable. His future was not written in stone. If he had trusted his closest allies, instead of fearing their judgment, he might have become the Jedi the galaxy needed. His children would have known a different father, and the Empire may have never risen. The fabric of the galaxy is shaped by these choices. When viewed from afar, they seem inevitable, a chain of events leading to a single outcome. But up close, the truth is far more complicated. Each moment is an opportunity for change, for a path not taken. Every war, every betrayal, every victory is built upon the fragile decisions of those who came before. The Force does not demand a singular fate. It whispers of possibilities, of roads unseen, of power waiting to be claimed. Some embrace those whispers, others turn away, and history bends to their will. These are the stories of what could have been. A galaxy where familiar faces walk unfamiliar paths, where the destinies of heroes and villains intertwine in ways never imagined. Some fates are darker, others offer a glimpse of hope, but all reveal the truth that the future is never set. The next chapter begins with a choice, and that choice reshapes everything. The duel on Cloud City was never meant to be a test of skill. Vader had already decided the outcome. He was not there to kill his son, nor to destroy him. He was there to break him. It was a carefully orchestrated confrontation designed to strip Luke of every illusion he had about the world, about the Jedi, about himself. It was never a question of whether Vader could defeat him. He was waiting for the moment when Luke's spirit would falter, and in this timeline it does. The shock of hearing the truth about his father doesn't lead to denial or rejection. It opens a door Luke never knew existed. Everything Obi-Wan told him was a lie. Everything the rebellion fought for was built on a foundation of deception. The Jedi were not the guardians of peace, but the architects of their own downfall, and Luke had been groomed to repeat their mistakes. The darkness that had always lurked beneath the surface, the frustration, the anger, the sense of never belonging, finds direction. When Vader extends his hand, offering power, offering purpose, Luke takes it. The act itself is almost ritualistic. The Jedi have always feared the dark side, treating it as something to be avoided. But Luke embraces it with clarity. The fall is not immediate, but once the first step is taken, there is no turning back. Vader wastes no time. The moment they leave Bespin, Luke's training begins. Unlike Obi-Wan or Yoda, Vader has no interest in patience or balance. He strips Luke of hesitation, forcing him to unlearn everything he thought he knew about the Force. Pain replaces meditation. Ruthlessness replaces restraint. And with every lesson, the last remnants of the boy who had once stared at twin suns on Tatooine begin to disappear. Palpatine watches from the shadows, amused but cautious. Vader's loyalty has always been conditional, held together by fear and resentment. But Luke is different. He learns quickly, adapts even faster. His connection to the Force surpasses even his father's at that age. The Emperor sees something that even Vader does not. A successor, not an apprentice. The rule of two was never meant to last forever, and Luke is proof of that. The moment will come when father and son must turn against one another, because in the Sith, there can be no equals. But Luke is not bound by Sith tradition. He does not see his father as an obstacle, nor does he see Palpatine as a master to be served. He sees a galaxy ruled by indecision, torn apart by endless conflict, and he is tired of fighting wars he does not control. He understands what Vader never could. True power is not taken with brute force, but with patience. And so he waits. He grows stronger. He earns the trust of both Sith Lords, all while knowing that one day he will have to kill them both. The rebellion doesn't realize what has happened until it is too late. They still believe Luke Skywalker is their greatest hope, that he will return to them. Leia feels the shift first, through the bond they never spoke of but always knew existed. But she cannot reach him. The boy she knew, the pilot who had once been reckless but full of light, is gone. In his place is something colder, something calculated. When they next see him, he does not wear the robes of a Jedi, nor the armor of a Sith. He does not speak in anger or rage. He speaks in truths. And the most terrifying part is that, for the first time, the rebellion begins to listen. For years, Sheev Palpatine studied the flaws of the Republic. He watched as corruption spread, as greed dictated policy, and as the Jedi clung to their traditions, too blind to see the war forming around them. He had spent decades planning its downfall, but at the final moment, something changed. The Sith had always operated in the shadows, manipulating events from behind the scenes. But Palpatine saw an opportunity to build something far greater than an empire. The Republic did not need to be destroyed. It needed to be rebuilt, guided by those who understood power, wisdom, and control. He did not reveal himself as Darth Sidious. Instead, he approached the Jedi Council with something unheard of: cooperation. Yoda was the first to sense the shift. There was no deception in Palpatine's voice when he spoke of balance, no hunger for conquest when he offered his knowledge. He presented a path forward, a republic where the Jedi did not serve as soldiers or enforcers, but as leaders. The war with the Separatists never began. The clone army, originally created as a tool for domination, became something different, a force of guardians, trained not for war, but for peacekeeping. The Jedi Order changed overnight. The rigid divide between light and dark was challenged, and the Council restructured itself to reflect the realities of the Force. No longer did the Jedi fear emotions, nor did they demand absolute detachment. Attachments were understood, studied, and embraced as part of growth. The ancient teachings of the Sith were not outlawed, but examined, their lessons used to strengthen the Order rather than corrupt it. Under Palpatine's leadership, the Jedi evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before, a unified force of scholars, warriors, and rulers, no longer bound by outdated restrictions. Not everyone accepted this change. Many within the Senate saw it as a shift toward tyranny, claiming that the Jedi were no longer peacekeepers, but monarchs. Some within the Order resisted as well, believing that this new philosophy strayed too far from their code. Count Dooku, once Palpatine's intended apprentice, became one of its greatest enemies. He led those who rejected this vision, claiming that the Jedi had abandoned their purpose. He was not wrong. The Jedi were no longer what they once were. They had become something stronger, something that no longer relied on outdated traditions. Without war, the Republic flourished. The Outer Rim, long neglected and abandoned to crime syndicates and warlords, was finally given the resources and attention it had been denied for centuries. The Jedi ensured that those who had suffered under Republic rule were brought into this new age, their voices no longer ignored. But balance does not mean peace. Even with all the power at his disposal, Palpatine could not control the will of every world. There would always be those who resisted, those who saw his leadership as a threat. His mind, once set on destruction, now faced an entirely different challenge, preserving what he had built. The Sith had always believed that true strength came from control, that peace was only achieved through absolute rule. But Palpatine saw something greater. The Force was not meant to be wielded by a single emperor or a council of warriors. It was meant to guide the galaxy forward. He had abandoned his original purpose, but in doing so, had created something far more lasting. Yet the question remained, how long could such a delicate balance be maintained? Theed's power generator hums with dying energy as the battle comes to an end. Darth Maul lies lifeless on the cold metal floor, but the victory is hollow. Qui-Gon Jinn does not rise as he should. His body is broken, his connection to the Force fractured. Obi-Wan Kenobi kneels beside him, the relief of survival overshadowed by something far heavier. The Council will call this a victory, but they were not here. They did not feel what happened in that final moment. Qui-Gon should have died, yet the Force did not let him go. Something lingers in him now, something unshackled from the constraints of Jedi teachings. He has spent years questioning the Council, searching for deeper truths they refuse to see. He once believed in the living Force, but as he stares at the remains of a Sith, he feels something else, an understanding he cannot explain. Obi-Wan, still bound to his training, watches his master with growing unease. The man who rises from the floor is not the same one who knelt before it. Their return to Coruscant is strained. Qui-Gon no longer speaks of balance or destiny. He speaks of the Jedi's blindness, of the arrogance that led to their decay. Obi-Wan listens, but the doubts fester. The Council sees only the scars on his body, not the shift in his mind. They name him a war hero, but he rejects the title. When they refuse his request to train Anakin, it is not anger that drives him to leave. It is certainty. Obi-Wan follows, not out of loyalty, but out of duty. He has fought too hard to let his master walk alone into uncertainty. He does not yet see the path before them, but he knows it cannot be walked alone. They vanish from Jedi records, two warriors stripped of rank and allegiance. The Jedi call it defection, but Qui-Gon calls it freedom. Years pass in the shadows. The galaxy moves forward, oblivious to the shift that has begun. Anakin Skywalker is no Jedi Padawan, nor is he a Sith apprentice. He is something new, something built in the space between light and darkness. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan teach him not as masters, but as guides, shaping his power through raw experience rather than doctrine. The boy they found on Tatooine grows into a warrior unlike any the galaxy has seen. He does not fear his emotions. He does not suppress his attachments. He wields the Force with purpose, untamed, yet controlled. The Jedi sense something in the Force, a shadow moving beyond their reach. They whisper of a growing darkness, of something neither Jedi nor Sith. But the truth is far worse. The Order has spent centuries defining the Force as a battle between two sides. Yet Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have shown that this belief is a prison. The Jedi refuse to see it, and the Sith do not understand it. Anakin walks forward, no longer bound by the chains of either order. The Republic stands on the brink of war, but for the first time, there is a force moving outside its control. The Jedi and Sith fight for dominance, unaware that something new has already begun. Yoda watches the Republic with quiet certainty. The Clone Wars have not yet begun, but he already sees their end. The darkness moving through the Senate, the Jedi's growing complacency, the slow but inevitable rise of something that will burn everything they have built. The Jedi have always waited, trusting in the Force to reveal the right path. But patience is no longer enough. A choice must be made. For 9 centuries, Yoda has taught restraint. He has followed the old ways, preserving tradition even when the galaxy changed around him. But now, tradition has become a weakness. He sees it in the Council's endless debates, in their refusal to acknowledge what is coming. The Republic is not dying. It is already dead, held together only by illusions of democracy. The Sith do not need to strike from the shadows when corruption has already rotted the foundation. So Yoda does what no Jedi before him has dared. He acts. The Republic is not overthrown in a single night, nor is it conquered through war. Yoda's takeover is precise, methodical. He does not rely on armies or Sith manipulation. He uses something far more powerful, control over the Force itself. His wisdom, long seen as a symbol of peace, becomes something else entirely. Senators who once dismissed him as an ancient monk now see him as a force they cannot oppose. The Jedi do not serve the Republic anymore, they lead it. The transition is seamless. Palpatine never rises to power. Dooku's rebellion never forms. The clone army, meant to be a tool of war, becomes the foundation of a new order. The Jedi do not fight and die in a conflict designed to destroy them. Instead, they stand at the center of the Republic's rebirth, no longer bound by the limitations of the past. The Senate remains, but its authority is hollow. Decisions are made by those who can see beyond politics, beyond ambition. Balance, as the Jedi once understood it, no longer applies. Yoda has always spoken of harmony, but now he enforces it. Peace is not an ideal, it is a condition. The Jedi evolve into something greater than warriors or philosophers. They become architects of the future. Their code is rewritten, their structure reshaped. The old Jedi Order was flawed, weakened by indecision and fear. This new order does not hesitate. It does not allow weakness to spread. But control is never absolute. Even the wisest mind cannot predict every outcome. There are those who see this rule for what it is, not balance, but dominance. The Sith, long considered the greatest threat to peace, are nothing compared to the enemies growing within the shadows of Yoda's perfect republic. Not through the dark side, not through war, but through quiet rebellion. For centuries, the Jedi believed that their greatest test would come from outside their walls. They never considered the possibility that it would come from within. Yoda rules with patience, with purpose. But power, once taken, is not so easily given back. The question is no longer who will challenge him, but whether he will see the warning signs before it is too late. Anakin Skywalker stands at the edge of a decision that will change the galaxy. The visions of Padme's death haunt him, pressing against his mind like a storm he cannot escape. In another timeline, he would have turned to the only man who promised him salvation, Palpatine. But here, he does something different. He turns to Obi-Wan. For years, Anakin has been told that attachment is dangerous, that love leads to fear, and fear to suffering. But Obi-Wan does not meet him with judgment. He listens. He does not dismiss Anakin's pain or warn him against love. He acknowledges it. The bond between them, once strained by duty and expectation, strengthens in that moment. Anakin does not carry his burden alone, and in doing so, the weight of it begins to lift. The Council is hesitant, but Yoda sees something in Anakin that was always there, potential not just for strength, but for wisdom. The Jedi had spent centuries enforcing detachment, believing it was the only way to maintain balance. But balance is not suppression, it is understanding. Through Anakin, the order begins to shift. Attachments are no longer forbidden but guided. Emotions are no longer weaknesses, but studied with care. Anakin rises not as a warrior consumed by war, but as a teacher, a leader who walks both the battlefield and the halls of the temple with the same confidence. The Clone Wars end not in betrayal, but in victory. The Sith, unable to manipulate the fractures in the Order, are forced into retreat. When the time comes to confront Palpatine, Anakin stands not as his apprentice, but as his downfall. With peace restored, Anakin watches the Republic heal. He is no longer a Jedi Knight. He is a master in every sense of the word. He trains the next generation not in fear of the dark side, but in awareness of its temptations. He is the fulfillment of the prophecy, the one who has truly brought balance to the Force. But destiny is never so simple. Luke Skywalker grows up in a world where his father is not a fallen Jedi, but a legend. He carries a name that commands respect, but also expectation. His power is unmatched, his talent undeniable. But Luke does not struggle with doubt the way his father did. He struggles with restraint. Power comes easily to him, and the more he learns, the more he craves. Leia, steady and wise, follows in her father's footsteps. She embraces the Jedi code, tempered by compassion, trained not just as a leader, but as a guardian of peace. But Luke is different. He does not see the rules his father created as necessary. He sees them as limitations. The lessons meant to keep him balanced feel like chains. And in the quiet corners of the galaxy, there are whispers that offer him something more. Anakin once stood at a crossroads, and he chose the path of redemption. Now, his son stands at the same threshold. But this time, the path forward is uncertain, and Anakin, now the wisest of masters, may be powerless to stop what is coming. The Jedi had always feared Mace Windu's mastery of Varpad. It was a fighting style that flirted with the dark side, channeling the raw fury of combat without surrendering to it. Windu believed in control, in balance through willpower, in wielding both serenity and aggression as weapons. But there was always a limit, a threshold he would not cross. Until now. Standing in the Chancellor's office, blade locked with Palpatine's, Windu does not hesitate. He sees the Sith Lord's true nature, the darkness behind the mask of civility. The Shatterpoint is clear. Palpatine is a weakness in the galaxy's foundation, and weaknesses must be broken. In another timeline, Anakin's arrival would have changed everything. Here, it changes nothing. The strike is final. The Republic does not fall to the Sith, it falls to something else entirely. Windu does not claim the title of Emperor. He does not sit on a throne or rule from the shadows. He is not a Sith, nor is he Jedi. He is something new. The galaxy has been at war for too long, its laws manipulated, its people deceived. He has no interest in the politics of the Senate or the whispers of the Jedi Council. Justice is the only thing that matters, and justice does not bow to debate. The Jedi Order fractures. Some remain loyal to the old ways, unwilling to follow Windu into the unknown. Others see the truth in his actions. They abandon their robes, their titles, and forge something different. The Shatterpoint Guard is born, not an army of Sith, not an order of Jedi, but something in between. They wield control and chaos with equal discipline. Their blades burn purple, neither light nor dark, but something that defies both. The Clone Wars end in days. The Separatists are crushed, not through negotiation, but through annihilation. Windu does not tolerate disorder, nor does he show mercy to those who profited from conflict. Dooku is executed, Grievous is hunted to extinction, and the warlords who rise in their place are shattered before they can take root. The Republic is reforged in something stronger, something unyielding. But power demands enemies. Those who once fought against the Sith now turn against Windu. Yoda sees what has happened and calls it corruption. Obi-Wan calls it tyranny. The rebellion that never formed against the Empire now forms against him. The Jedi who remain do not understand. They see only what they wish to see. They have lived in a world ruled by weakness for so long that they mistake strength for oppression. Windu does not waver. He has already seen the future in the fractures of the Force. The galaxy will never know peace through compromise. It must be shaped. It must be forged. And those unwilling to accept that truth have no place in it. The war between Jedi and Sith was a battle between two broken ideologies. In Windu's galaxy, there is only one law. The strong survive, the weak fall. And justice is no longer blind. It sees everything. Han Solo's body thawed, but something inside him never did. The seconds stretched into eternity in the carbonite, trapped, conscious, powerless. No ship to fly, no blaster to draw, no words to talk his way out. Only the unrelenting void, pressing against his mind, whispering in the silence. By the time he is freed, the man the rebellion knew is gone. The rogue with a quick draw and a faster smile has been replaced by something colder. Leia tries to reach him, but she sees it in his eyes. He is still locked in the void, still clawing to escape something that can no longer hold him. The galaxy has taken too much from him. He won't let it take anything else. The underworld sees his return first. Smugglers, bounty hunters and crime lords expect the same reckless gambler, the same Corellian pilot who got by on luck and charm. What they find instead is a force of nature. Han does not reclaim his old life. He reshapes it. He starts with the ones who left him to rot. Jabba's empire is shattered, not in a blaze of heroism, but through precision. Deals unravel, syndicates collapse, and those who think themselves untouchable learn the truth. Han Solo is no longer just a smuggler. He is Darth Mercurial. No Sith before him has ever moved like this. He does not rule from a throne or manipulate from the shadows. He does not kneel before the dark side, nor does he follow its traditions. The Force is not his master. It is his weapon, bent to his will, shaped by instincts honed in the back alleys of Nar Shaddaa and the battlefields of the rebellion. His power is not refined. It is raw, unpredictable, and no one can tell whether it will strike as a blade or a well-placed lie. The Hutts fall first, then the Crimson Dawn. The Black Sun watches and waits, knowing their time will come. The underworld is no longer ruled by old families and ancient debts. It belongs to the one man who never plays by the rules. The credits flow, but wealth is secondary. Han does not care for ruling. He only cares that no one will ever have power over him again. Luke searches for him. The name Darth Mercurial spreads across the stars, whispered in fear, dismissed as another warlord rising from the ashes of the Empire. But Luke knows better. He follows the trail, hoping to find the friend he once knew, the man who had saved him more times than he could count. What he finds is something else entirely. Han does not welcome him. There is no reunion, no brotherhood. The boy he once protected has become a Jedi, bound by duty and restraint. Han has no patience for either. He does not see Luke as a savior. He sees him as another chain trying to hold him down. The past is dead, buried in carbonite along with the man he used to be. Luke draws his saber, not to strike, but to reach him. Han only laughs. The Jedi will always fight for hope, but hope means nothing in the void. Boba Fett has spent his life in the shadow of greater powers. First, as a son watching his father die at the hands of Jedi. Then, as a bounty hunter, taking contracts from the highest bidder, whether it was the Hutts, the Empire, or anyone willing to pay. The armor he wore was a relic of a people he barely knew, a culture long shattered and scattered. He told himself he didn't care. Credits mattered. Survival mattered. But standing in Jabba's palace, watching the filth of the underworld bow before a slug, he realizes something. He is not a servant. He never has been. When Vader calls, Boba does not answer. When Jabba demands loyalty, Boba walks away. The credits mean nothing. The bounties are beneath him. He is Mandalorian, and Mandalorians do not kneel. The galaxy sees Boba Fett as a lone hunter, but he knows better. Mandalorians were warriors once, legends forged in battle, feared across the stars. That legacy has been buried under centuries of war, betrayal, and exile. The Empire has only made it worse, using Mandalore as just another world to exploit, its people forced into hiding, its warriors reduced to mercenaries or slaves. No more. Boba returns to Mandalore, and those who still remember their ancestors see him for what he is, a warrior unbroken, a leader who does not ask for permission. He does not claim a throne. He does not preach of honor. He brings weapons, ships, and purpose. The clans are scattered, but he gathers them one by one. Those who refuse to fight are left behind. Those who choose to follow him are forged into something stronger. The rebellion is losing. The Empire is too strong, its fleets too numerous, its grip too tight. They fight with desperation, hoping for a single victory that will turn the tide. But Boba has no interest in desperate battles. He has no interest in fighting the way the Jedi do. The Mandalorians do not join the rebellion, they take it over. The scattered cells, the broken warriors, the hopeless idealists, they all fall in line when the Mandalorians arrive. Boba does not fight for politics. He fights for something older, something stronger. The rebels are not an army. They are not soldiers. But under Boba's command, they become warriors. They fight not for a Senate that no longer exists, but for vengeance, for survival, for something that cannot be bargained away in treaties or negotiations. The first target is Kamino. The Empire still uses it, still grows its obedient troopers in vats, still feeds its war machine. Boba leads the assault himself. Clones were created to serve, to die for a republic that no longer exists. But Mandalorians were never meant to be slaves. Kamino burns. The cloning facilities are wiped from existence. The Empire's grip on its own war machine shattered. Boba does not celebrate. He does not stop. The war has only begun. The Empire believed the Mandalorians were broken. They will soon learn what happens when warriors remember who they are. Mother Talzin knew the darkness well. She had watched her children stolen, shaped into weapons for masters who saw them as nothing more than tools. But this time, she chose differently. Instead of delivering her son to the Sith, she sent him to the Jedi. The temple doors opened to a Zabrak child not raised in hatred, but still forged in the fire of Dathomir. The boy called Maul was powerful, his instincts sharper than the others, his connection to the Force raw and unrefined. The Masters hesitated. There was something in him that did not fit the Jedi mold. But Yoda, ever the seeker of balance, saw potential. Years later, another Zabrak child followed. Savage was larger, stronger, his presence like a storm that refused to be contained. They trained together, brothers not in blood, but in something deeper. The Jedi sought to calm them, to guide them toward peace. But peace was not in their nature. They were warriors, raised in a culture that thrived on strength, where power was not evil but necessary. The Council saw them as dangerous, but they did not fall to anger or corruption. They were disciplined, they were focused. They did not fear the dark, nor did they reject the light. Their methods did not align with the Order's traditions. Where other Jedi hesitated, they struck with precision. Where others sought to avoid conflict, they embraced it. They mastered the Force in ways their teachers did not understand, using their aggression without letting it consume them. But the Jedi did not change. Their ways were built on control, on limitation, on fear of what lay beyond their teachings. So the brothers walked away. They were not Sith, nor were they Jedi. They did not seek to conquer, nor did they seek to serve. They followed the will of the Force as it spoke to them, as it had always spoken to their kind. The galaxy did not need an order bound by tradition, nor an empire ruled by cruelty. It needed warriors unafraid of what the Force truly was. The Jedi called them exiles. The Sith called them heretics. Neither name mattered. When the Clone Wars began, the brothers did not fight for the Republic, nor for the Separatists. They fought for those abandoned in the chaos. Worlds left to burn, people used as pawns in a war they never asked for. They did not seek to destroy the Jedi, but when the Order hunted them, they struck back. Not in vengeance, but in defiance. The Council called them corrupted, dangerous, but the only crime they had committed was refusing to submit. When Order 66 came, they did not fall. They were never part of the Republic's machine, never bound to the structure that collapsed under its own blindness. When the Jedi were slaughtered, when the Sith claimed victory, they remained, unshaken, unbound. The galaxy had always been ruled by those who feared change, but Maul and Savage had no fear. The Force had chosen them for something greater, and no empire, no order, no master would ever stand in their way. The Republic was crumbling long before the Clone Wars. Count Dooku had seen it, felt it in every Senate chamber, in every negotiation riddled with corruption. The Jedi, once the guardians of peace, had become instruments of a decaying system. They followed the Republic blindly, upholding its authority rather than its ideals. Dooku had spoken out against it, had warned the Council of the dangers that lay ahead. When they refused to listen, he did not abandon them. He resolved to change them. Dooku did not walk the path of the Sith. When Darth Sidious whispered to him, offering power, he rejected it. The Dark Lord did not need another pawn. He needed a war, and Dooku would not be the one to give it to him. Instead, he remained within the Order, his influence growing, his voice becoming one of both dissent and wisdom. The Jedi were losing their way, but with patience, he could guide them back. He forged alliances with those disillusioned with the Republic's rule, not as enemies of the Jedi, but as architects of a better future. The separatist movement did not become a war machine under his command. It became a coalition of worlds seeking genuine reform, seeking to free themselves from the chains of a government that no longer served them. Dooku was not a warlord. He was a statesman, a leader with the vision the galaxy needed. But Palpatine would not be denied his war. The Sith Lord had orchestrated too much, manipulated too many. If Dooku would not be his puppet, then he would become an obstacle. The Clone Wars began not because of the Separatists, but because of Sidious himself. Assassinations, sabotage, deception. Every move was calculated to push the Republic and the Jedi toward inevitable conflict. The war Dooku had fought to prevent had come to pass, despite all his efforts. The Jedi were forced into battle, yet something had changed. The war did not unfold as Sidious had planned. Dooku's influence had reshaped the Order. The Jedi did not become generals mindlessly leading troops into war. They became mediators, strategists who sought solutions beyond the battlefield. The Republic, once Palpatine's plaything, found itself resisting his grip. Dooku led from the front, not as a Sith Lord, but as a Jedi who refused to let his people fall into darkness. His mastery of Makashi, his command of both diplomacy and combat, made him one of the most formidable figures in the war. He did not fight to destroy, he fought to protect. And with every battle, every negotiation, he brought the Republic closer to the reform it so desperately needed. Palpatine's plans unraveled. The Jedi, once blinded by tradition, had evolved. The Republic, once a dying institution, had found new strength. And at the center of it all was the man who had once been cast as a traitor. Dooku had been called many things: a count, a Jedi, a dissenter. But history would remember him as something far greater: the man who saved the Republic from itself. Ben Solo was meant to be many things: a Jedi, a leader, a hero. But destiny had never been kind to the Skywalkers. The weight of his lineage crushed him, shaping him into something else. When Snoke whispered, when the dark side called, he listened. But even in his rage, in his fury, he never truly let go of the light. The moment came on Starkiller Base. His father's hand reached for him, not as a warrior, but as a father. He struck Han Solo down, but the act did not free him. It left him hollow. The darkness was not enough. Snoke's chains did not offer purpose, only servitude. For the first time, he questioned what it meant to be powerful. The war raged on, and Kylo Ren was expected to lead. Yet the deeper he ventured into the dark, the more he saw through the illusion of control. The First Order was not strength, it was fear masquerading as power. Its generals, its supreme leader, all clung to an outdated vision of the Empire. They did not understand what was coming. Rey saw it first. Their connection through the Force, something beyond light and dark, revealed what neither had expected. They were not enemies. They were mirrors. Snoke sought to manipulate it, but his arrogance sealed his fate. When Kylo turned on his master, he did not do it for the Sith. He did not do it for the First Order. He did it to break free. But freedom came with a price. With Snoke dead, the First Order demanded a new supreme leader. He played the role, but he was never theirs. He waged war against the Resistance, but not to destroy them, to test them. The weak would fall, the strong would rise. He was reforging the battlefield itself. Rey stood in his path, and time again, he hesitated. He had killed his past, yet she stood before him as a future he did not understand. It was Leia who shattered the illusion. She had never stopped believing in him. When her presence faded from the Force, it was not a death, it was a call. Ben Solo, not Kylo Ren, answered. He let the mask fall, let the rage burn away, and saw the war for what it was. With Rey at his side, he built something new. Not Jedi, not Sith. A new order, one forged in fire. His warriors did not reject the dark, nor did they fear the light. They walked the edge, wielding both as weapons against those who sought only control. The First Order did not fall in a single battle. It crumbled from within. The weak-minded sought to reclaim the old ways, but Ben had learned. The cycle would not repeat. The Skywalker name would no longer be defined by failure. Ben Solo had been lost, but he was never broken. He had been Kylo Ren, but that was not his fate. He was the heir of Vader's power and Leia's heart, and with Rey, he would forge a path no Skywalker had ever walked. Ahsoka Tano had always questioned. She had questioned the Jedi, questioned the war, questioned why she had been abandoned when she needed them most. When the Order cast her aside, she had walked away. But what if she had stayed? What if she had decided that if the Jedi would not change, she would change them? When Maul spoke to her on Mandalore, his words had been meant as manipulation, yet they planted something deeper, an understanding. The Jedi were doomed not because of their weakness, but because they refused to adapt. They clung to an outdated code, fighting a war they had already lost. He had offered her power, but power without vision was nothing. She did not join him. She did not join the Sith. She became something else. She did not flee when the Empire rose. She did not hide. When the Jedi Purge began, she was not its victim. She was its architect. The Inquisitorius was meant to hunt Jedi, but under Ahsoka, it evolved. Her hunters did not destroy their targets. They converted them. Survivors were given a choice: continue to run, continue to cling to a dead order, or accept the truth. The Force was not light or dark. It was raw, untamed, and only those who embraced both sides could survive in the galaxy that had taken everything from them. Some resisted, but they never resisted for long. Ahsoka did not break them. She opened their eyes. Her warriors did not wield red sabers, nor did they cling to the blue and green of the past. Their weapons, like themselves, were forged anew. Some bled their crystals willingly, others blended them, fractured light and darkness in perfect harmony. They did not kneel to a master. They did not obey an ancient code. They followed one rule: strength through understanding, power through purpose. Darth Vader took notice. He had known Ahsoka as his apprentice, as his friend, as his shadow. Now, she was his competition. The two clashed across the stars, and where he sought to destroy, she sought to consume. He had once been the chosen one, but Ahsoka understood something he never had. There was no balance without acceptance. Her inquisitors spread across the galaxy, not as enforcers of the Empire, but as something greater. They were neither Jedi nor Sith, but something far worse. A movement, an ideology. Rebels whispered of them as nightmares. Jedi in hiding feared them more than clones or stormtroopers. They were proof that survival was not enough. Evolution was necessary. The Empire would fall one day, the Sith would crumble, but Ahsoka's teachings would endure. Hers was not a legacy of destruction or blind devotion. It was something else entirely. It was the beginning of an order that neither the Sith nor Jedi could erase. Grievous had been designed to kill. His bones had been reforged in steel, his flesh stripped away to create something monstrous. He had been told it was an honor, that he would be stronger, faster, unstoppable. But he had not been made into a warrior. He had been turned into a tool. The Sith had promised him revenge. They had whispered to him of the Jedi's betrayal, fed his hatred until it burned away everything else. But war, endless and unrelenting, had forced him to see the truth. The Jedi had never been his enemy. He had been a pawn in another man's game. And pawns did not survive. When Count Dooku fell, the war did not end. The droids he commanded continued to fight, programmed to obey commands that no longer came. The Republic became the Empire, but the New Order had no place for him. Sidious discarded him like all broken weapons. He should have died on Utapau, another forgotten casualty of a war that had never been his. But he did not. It was the Jedi who saved him. The last survivors of the Order had no reason to trust him. He had slaughtered their kind, hunted them across the stars. But when the Purge came, when clones turned against their generals, the warlord who had once sought their extinction became their shield. The mechanical body that had once crushed Jedi now stood between them and annihilation. He did not fight for redemption. He had no illusions of forgiveness. But he understood what it meant to be hunted, to have one's purpose twisted by those who held power. His hands had been forced, his choices stolen. Now he fought to ensure that no one else would suffer the same fate. The lightsabers he once collected were no longer trophies. He did not carry them as spoils of war, reminders of his conquests. Instead, they became weapons returned to those who had been stripped of everything. The Jedi he had been made to hate became the ones he swore to protect. He gathered them from the ruins of their order, hidden among the wreckage of the old Republic. Some could not trust him, could not accept that a butcher had become their guardian. But the galaxy had changed, and so had he. His battle was no longer for vengeance, no longer for honor. He did not fight for a banner or a cause. He fought so that the Jedi would not be wiped from history, so that they would not be forgotten. The war was never about Republic versus Separatists. It had always been about control, and Grievous had spent too long as a weapon wielded by others. Now he chose his own path. He was not a Jedi. He was not a Sith. He was something else, a protector. Plo Koon should have died above Cato Neimoidia. The cockpit flames, the plummeting starfighter, the clone troopers who had turned from allies to executioners, it should have been the end. But the Force had other plans. He survived the crash, barely. The Jedi had always believed survival was a sign of destiny, but Plo saw something else. A mistake. The Republic was gone, its ideals swept away in the tide of Imperial order. He watched from the edges of the galaxy, a phantom in the ruins of the Jedi Order. He had always believed in peace, in the nobility of the Jedi's purpose. But the Jedi had failed. They had preached enlightenment while sitting blind in their ivory tower. They had wielded power but feared its true purpose. The Empire did not fear power. It understood it. Plo Koon did not return to his fellow survivors. He did not seek out Kenobi or Yoda. He buried his past, left his name behind, and observed. He saw how quickly the galaxy accepted Imperial rule, how systems that once resisted fell into line, how crime syndicates were dismantled, how warlords that had profited from endless conflict were eradicated. Efficiency, order, control. He had been raised to see the Jedi way as the only way. But if the Jedi had been right, why had they been so easy to destroy? He did not serve the Emperor. He served what the Empire could become, an unbreakable machine, one with no room for corruption, no tolerance for weakness. He moved through the ranks quietly, always watching, always studying. The Inquisitors were blunt instruments, their hunger for power outweighing their intelligence. Vader was rage incarnate, a weapon bound to his master's will. The Emperor, a relic of an older game, a creature of shadows clinging to fear and deception. Plo Koon did not need deception, he needed results. He built something the rebellion never saw coming. Not fleets or armies, but minds. A network of officers, strategists and analysts who could predict insurgencies before they formed. He transformed the Empire's military doctrine, tightening its grip until there was no space for rebellion to breathe. The Jedi had spent centuries wielding wisdom and patience, but they had done nothing with it. Now, he wielded it against them. To the rebels, Vader was their greatest enemy. The Dark Lord hunted them across the stars, a relentless force of destruction. But Vader was predictable. He was fury and grief, a man still ruled by his past. Plo Koon had no past. The rebellion did not know his name, did not see the war being won before it could even begin. Their supply chains dried up. Their safe houses became traps. Their best pilots never made it back to their fleets. By the time they realized they were fighting a ghost, it was already too late. Ahsoka Tano's death was a myth carefully cultivated. To the Jedi, she had been a fallen sister lost in the chaos of war. To the Sith, she was insignificant, another failure left to fade into obscurity. Neither truly saw her for what she had become. In the wake of the Republic's collapse, she did not run. She did not hide. She built. Beneath the shifting sands of forgotten worlds, within the ruins of abandoned Jedi temples, she gathered those who had slipped through the cracks. Survivors of Order 66, lost apprentices, disillusioned warriors, those who had been cast aside by the rigid doctrines of both Jedi and Sith. They did not follow the old ways. They did not kneel before darkness or light. They became something new. Ahsoka did not seek an empire of planets. She sought an empire of minds. Her agents infiltrated the rising Imperial war machine, embedding themselves where even Palpatine's vision did not reach. Some stood in the halls of power as lowly officers, others in the shadowed alleys where rebellion whispered its first breaths. She had seen what the Sith had done in secret, how they had twisted the Republic from within. She had learned from them, but unlike the Sith, she had no need for public dominion. Her control was unseen, her influence untouchable. Where Palpatine wielded fear, she wielded certainty. By the time the Rebel Alliance took shape, her network was already woven through the very foundation of the galaxy. Jedi remnants who thought they were alone found themselves approached by her disciples. Sith acolytes seeking power found their loyalties tested. Even the Empire was not immune. Its most skilled warriors, its most trusted agents, they all had a choice: serve the warlords of the known galaxy, or stand with the hidden empire of the forgotten. When Luke Skywalker emerged from the sands of Tatooine, the galaxy was already in motion. His fight was not just against the Empire. It was against something older, something unseen. The Jedi had returned in him, but the Jedi Order had long since shattered. Ahsoka's warriors had no patience for prophecy, no interest in redemption. When he sought out lost Jedi texts, he found them already claimed. When he searched for hidden survivors, They were already trained in ways he could not understand. His vision of the Jedi, pure, righteous, noble, was an illusion. The Jedi had not returned in him. They had already returned in secret, bound to a leader who did not seek a throne, did not seek destruction. She sought control, and when at last Luke stood before her, he did not find an enemy to be vanquished. He found the last apprentice of the Clone Wars, the phantom of an age long buried. And for the first time he realized his war had never truly been his to fight. Count Dooku had always known the Republic was failing. Long before the Clone Wars, before whispers of rebellion, before the Jedi grew blind to corruption, he had seen the inevitable collapse. It was not bitterness that led him to leave the Order. It was conviction. A belief that the Jedi had become servants to a crumbling machine rather than the guardians of justice they once were. But in this reality, Dooku never bent the knee to the Sith. When Palpatine's plans began to take shape, Dooku was no pawn in a grander game. He saw the manipulation, he recognized the deception, and rather than playing his part in an empire's birth, he did what no Jedi before him had dared. He led a rebellion that was not bound to darkness. The separatist movement became something far greater than a tool for the Sith. It became a true revolution. Under Dooku's leadership, it was not a war of conquest, but of liberation. Planets long burdened by the Republic's greed found hope in a man who spoke not of control, but of freedom. He gathered warriors, politicians, even Jedi who had begun to sense the darkness rising within the Senate. To them, he was not a traitor. He was a visionary. But Dooku's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness. His mind, sharp as a blade, saw the flaws in every system, every leader, every order. He could dismantle a government with words alone. He could reshape entire star systems through sheer will. But he could not escape himself. His nobility, his arrogance, his belief in his own judgment, these things made him a formidable force, yet they also blinded him. He knew the war was righteous, yet he refused to accept that it was unwinnable. He saw Palpatine's grip tightening, yet he still believed in his own ability to overcome it. And worst of all, he trusted that his separatists, those who followed him so faithfully, could maintain their unity without him. The war dragged on, battles were won, systems liberated, but Palpatine was a patient monster. While Dooku built his rebellion in open defiance, the Sith Master played the long game. He did not need to destroy Dooku. He needed only to wait. And so, the weight of war became Dooku's burden alone. As years passed, allies grew weary. Soldiers questioned if they were merely exchanging one ruler for another. Even the Jedi who had followed him began to wonder if the fight was righteous, or simply a war driven by one man's refusal to let go of his ideals. The moment Palpatine had foreseen finally came. One betrayal, one misstep, and the dream of a better galaxy fell apart. Dooku, once the greatest threat to the Sith's designs, became a footnote in history, a leader without a throne, a king without a crown. His legacy lived on, but not as he had envisioned. His war had been noble, his vision had been pure, but the galaxy did not care for noble visions. It cared only for power. Han Solo was never meant to be a hero. He had spent his life running, from debts, from responsibilities, from the war that tore the galaxy apart. The underworld was his home, the stars his sanctuary. The Rebel Alliance, the Empire, the Jedi. They were all just different sides of the same war, a war he wanted no part of. But the galaxy did not care what Han Solo wanted. There was no escaping forever. The underworld had always been a place of shifting alliances, but when the Empire tightened its grip, the balance changed. The crime lords who once ruled the Outer Rim found themselves under siege. Smugglers were hunted, their routes cut off, their havens burned. The Empire did not tolerate lawlessness, not unless it served them. And Han Solo? He had made himself too dangerous to ignore. He had been more than a smuggler for some time now. The frozen months in carbonite had done something to him, fractured something inside him, rebuilt him in ways he barely understood. There were whispers that he had touched the Force, that his survival had unlocked something buried beneath his charm and recklessness. He didn't claim to be a Jedi, didn't claim to be Sith, but the way he moved, the way he read people, the way he knew things before they happened, it was more than luck. The Empire feared what they could not control, and Han had become unpredictable. But he was still a survivor. He played both sides, striking deals with Imperial officers while feeding information to rebel spies. The rebellion sought him out, hoping for an ally. But Han didn't deal in loyalty. He dealt in leverage. When Leia Organa came to him, it was not a plea for help, not an appeal to his better nature. She knew better. She came with an offer, one even Han Solo couldn't refuse. A way out, not just for him, but for those who had been swept up in the war alongside him. Chewbacca, Lando, the smugglers and scoundrels who had fought battles they never signed up for. The rebels needed someone who understood the Empire's supply lines, someone who could outthink Imperial blockades, someone who could get into places no one else could. Han named his price. Not credits, not power, freedom. A promise that when the war ended, he could walk away. No debts, no obligations, just the Falcon, the stars, and the open sky. Leia agreed. And so Han Solo made his last gamble, not as a rebel, not as a soldier, but as the only man in the galaxy who could play both sides and still walk away alive. If the Empire caught him, he would be executed. If the rebels failed, his name would be lost to history. But if he won, Han Solo would be free. Boba Fett had never been a man of honor. He had never cared for legacy, for heritage, for the old ways of Mandalore. Those traditions had meant nothing when Jango Fett had been gunned down, when his father's killer had walked away without consequence. Boba had grown up in a galaxy that did not care for warriors, only for those who survived. He had survived, but survival was no longer enough. The war between the Jedi and Sith had left Mandalore broken time and time again. The Republic had used them, the Sith had manipulated them, and the Empire had discarded them. The clans had scattered, reduced to mercenaries and warlords fighting for scraps. Mandalore was a name, a memory, a ghost of what it had once been. That was going to change. Boba Fett was no king, no savior, but he knew war, knew how to lead, knew how to strike fear into the hearts of those who had long forgotten the strength of his people. The Darksaber had been passed from one unworthy hand to another, a symbol of power wielded by those too weak to hold it. Boba did not claim it. He did not need it. His rule was forged not by tradition, but by the will of warriors who had lost everything and wanted only one thing: vengeance. The clans that remained had been waiting for someone to unite them, but not under honor, not under prophecy. They followed the only truth the galaxy had ever respected: strength. Fett had spent his life in the underworld, working for the highest bidder, but Mandalore was not for sale. The Jedi had betrayed his people in their endless wars. The Sith had promised power and delivered only destruction. The Republic, the Empire, the Rebellion, they were all the same. They would all pay. The Mandalorians did not march in open battle, did not seek war on the Empire's terms. Fett taught them what he had learned in the shadows: hit fast, strike hard, leave nothing behind. Supply lines vanished, governors disappeared, entire garrisons turned to ash before the Empire realized they were at war. They had seen rebellions before, had crushed armies, but they had never fought Mandalorians with nothing left to lose. The Jedi thought themselves protectors of the weak. They had failed. The Sith sought to rule through fear. They had grown complacent. The Empire believed itself untouchable. It had made too many enemies. Fett was not here to conquer, not here to rebuild a forgotten past. He did not care for the ideals of Mandalore, for the dream of a restored people. He cared only for retribution. And in his wake, Mandalore was reborn, not as a nation, not as a world, but as a force that would never be ignored again. Kylo Ren was never weak, never lost. He had never doubted the path before him, only those who sought to control it. Snoke had believed himself a master, a teacher, a puppeteer guiding a wayward apprentice toward ultimate darkness. Kylo had played his part, bowed his head, and learned all there was to learn. Then, when the moment came, he did what every true master of the dark should do. He destroyed his own master. The throne of the Supreme Leader was not an end, but a beginning. Snoke had been powerful, but he had been a relic, clinging to the Sith's obsession with control and destruction. That was their weakness, their flaw. The Jedi sought purity, the Sith sought domination. Kylo Ren sought something greater. Balance. Not the balance of the Jedi who feared darkness, not the balance of the Sith who drowned in their own fury. True balance, an understanding of the Force in its rawest, purest form. The Jedi cut themselves off from emotion. The Sith gave themselves to it without restraint. Kylo mastered both. He wielded anger without letting it consume him, embraced discipline without denying his own instincts. Where Vader had been a broken man, Kylo Ren was something stronger, something refined. The First Order was no longer a tool of destruction, no longer an instrument of a dead Emperor's will. Kylo reforged it in his own image, not an empire of mindless obedience, but an army built for something far greater. The galaxy did not need rulers. It needed vision. It needed order. And then Rey came to face him. She expected a man drowning in rage, a boy desperate for power, a lost soul searching for redemption. She found none of these things. She found a force of nature, controlled, focused, unshakable. She had been told Kylo Ren was at war with himself, that he could be turned, that somewhere beneath his mask there was Ben Solo waiting to be saved. But the man before her was not a broken remnant of what once was. He was something new, something terrifying in its certainty. He did not need to be saved. The battle between them was not one of light versus dark, not a clash of hero and villain. It was a test, a challenge between two warriors who had walked different roads and come to the same battlefield. Rey fought for hope. Kylo fought for purpose. She wielded the past. He forged the future. In that moment she understood. The Jedi had fallen because they refused to change. The Sith had fallen because they embraced nothing but destruction. Kylo Ren had transcended them both. He was not Sith, not Jedi. He was something greater. And if she could not match him, if she could not see beyond the old ways, then she would fall like all who had come before. Because Kylo Ren was not searching for power. He was the inevitable result of those who had misused it. The moment had come, the moment he had long foreseen. The Death Star hummed with raw energy, the throne room a battleground of fate. But Vader did not act out of love, not out of desperation or redemption. He acted because the Emperor had proven himself weak. Palpatine's rule had been built on deception, manipulation, and cowardice. He had played the long game, weaving lies into the fabric of the galaxy, but he had never been a warrior. He had used others, Dooku, Maul, Grievous, Anakin himself, to fight battles he had never dared to face alone. and now he stood exposed. The lightning surged toward Luke, the Emperor's cackling laughter echoing off the walls. But Vader saw what Palpatine could not. He saw a ruler whose time had passed. The Empire did not need a withered sorcerer clinging to power. It needed strength, discipline, vision. The Emperor had orchestrated the rise of the Sith, but he had never been fit to rule them. Vader turned. The choice was never in doubt. The mechanical grip tightened around the Emperor's frail body, cutting off his words mid-sentence. The shock in Palpatine's face was a fleeting satisfaction before Vader hurled him into the abyss. The Dark Lord did not hesitate, did not waver, did not second-guess his decision. He had always been the stronger one. Now, he was the only one. Luke staggered forward, expecting his father to collapse, to falter, to seek absolution in his final breath. But Vader did not fall. The pain of his injuries, the suffering he had endured, the torment of decades, it all fueled him. His mask turned toward his son, and the truth settled in. Anakin Skywalker had never returned. Darth Vader had won. The throne was his now, the Empire his to command. The rebels outside fought for a galaxy they did not understand. They saw tyranny where Vader saw order, oppression where he saw stability. Under his rule, there would be no Senate weighed down by corruption, no Jedi to weaken the people with their naive morality. There would be no hidden hands pulling the strings, only a single will, unstoppable and absolute. And then there was Luke. The boy had stood before both Sith Lords and refused to turn, but now there was no Emperor, no puppet master whispering temptations. There was only his father, offering him something beyond the limitations of the Jedi, a place at his side. Vader did not ask for loyalty. He demanded understanding. The Jedi way had failed. Obi-Wan, Yoda, and the rest had all clung to their outdated teachings and died for them. The rebels would only bring chaos, division, endless war. But together, father and son, they could shape the future. Not as Sith, not as Jedi, but as something greater. The Death Star trembled as the battle raged outside. The fate of the galaxy stood on a knife's edge. Luke's answer would decide its future. The order had been absolute, its execution swift. The Jedi were declared traitors, and the clones, once their trusted comrades, became their executioners. For most, the inhibitor chips made it effortless. Thought was replaced by command, loyalty twisted into betrayal. But not all clones were consumed by the programming. Some felt it, deep in their bones, an unease, a horror that clawed at them even as they fired on their own generals. Captain Rex had torn the chip from his skull before it could consume him. Commander Cody had not been as fortunate. He had carried out Order 66 with precision, his blasters cutting down Jedi without hesitation. But as time passed, the echoes of what he had done haunted him. The memories did not fade. They sharpened, resurfacing in his mind with unbearable clarity. The trust in Kenobi's eyes before the shots rang out. The way the Jedi Master had fought to survive, not to kill. The bitter realization that he had been nothing more than a tool. The Empire offered no absolution. They were soldiers, not men. Their purpose was dictated, not chosen. But for Rex, for Cody, for the few who could still think for themselves, there was no redemption under the banner of the Empire. They defected. The rebellion that formed in the wake of the Jedi Purge had been small, scattered. But now, something new rose in the shadows, a force the Empire never expected. The hunters had become the hunted. Clone against clone, brother against brother. Rex led the charge, his armor still painted in the blue of the 501st, but stripped of its allegiance. He had fought alongside Anakin Skywalker, alongside Ahsoka Tano, alongside generals who had trusted him with their lives. Now he fought to atone for the ones who had fallen. He was no Jedi, but he would not let their legacy die. Cody fought for something more personal. He had seen the Jedi as leaders, as commanders, but also as friends. Kenobi had always trusted him, respected him, treated him as more than just a weapon, and he had repaid that trust with treachery. Cody did not believe in redemption. He believed in justice. The Empire had used them, discarded them, and turned them into monsters. It was time to remind them that the clones were more than numbers in a database. Their war was not one of grand battles or political maneuvers. It was fought in the back alleys of Coruscant, in the frozen wastes of abandoned bases, in the silent corridors of decommissioned starships. Clones who had once executed Jedi now sabotaged Imperial supply lines. They hijacked transport ships, freed prisoners, dismantled the very machine that had created them. But the burden did not ease. No battle won could undo the past. No act of rebellion could bring back the dead. They carried the weight of their sins every moment of every day. They were not heroes, not revolutionaries. They were ghosts of a war that should never have happened, and the Empire would learn to fear them. In the vast and uncharted darkness of the unknown regions, something stirs. It is not a fleet, not a rebellion, not the lingering shadow of the Sith Empire. It is older than all of them. A temple buried beneath the dust of forgotten ages, long abandoned by those who once whispered its name in reverence. Darth Sidious had scoured the galaxy for knowledge, but even he had overlooked this place. Perhaps he had sensed its power and chosen to leave it undisturbed. Perhaps it had hidden itself, waiting for the right moment to call forth a new heir. The structure looms, carved from obsidian and woven with veins of crimson light, its energy pulsing like a heartbeat beneath the surface. Inside, the walls breathe with the echoes of a past no Jedi archive has recorded. This temple does not belong to the Sith as they are known. It predates them. It does not exist to serve an emperor, nor does it cling to the teachings of the rule of two. It does not care for the petty wars between Jedi and Sith. It has waited in silence, keeping its secrets until the galaxy is ready to hear them again. The first to answer its call are not Sith Lords, but acolytes, descendants of those who fled the rise of Sidious, the purges of Vader, the extinction of their kind. They have no master. They have no guiding doctrine. They only have the temple's whispers, its visions, its demands. And what it tells them is this: the Chosen One was never meant to restore balance. Balance is an illusion. The Force is not a scale to be tipped. It is a storm to be controlled. They are neither Jedi nor Sith. They are something else, something long thought impossible. Unbound by the teachings that have shaped the Force for generations, they forge their own path. But every path must lead somewhere. And now the galaxy will feel the consequences of their awakening. Rumors begin to spread of cloaked figures moving in the outer rim, of strange disturbances in the Force. A hidden power begins to gather, its intentions unreadable, its reach growing. The Jedi remnants sense something shifting. The Sith cults scattered in the wake of Palpatine's fall turn their attention toward the unknown regions. A prophecy has been uncovered, one that predates even the ancient texts of the Jedi Order. Someone will rise to meet them. Perhaps it will be a Jedi, one who sees the return of something lost and seeks to understand it before it becomes a threat. Perhaps it will be a Sith, one who believes themselves the rightful heir to forgotten knowledge. Or perhaps it will be someone neither side expects, someone who does not see this as a war, but as an opportunity. The temple does not wait. Its power is growing, and for the first time in centuries, it is awake. The Emperor is dead, but his empire does not crumble. It fractures, splitting into factions like a wounded beast fighting to stay alive. Some remain loyal to Vader, the last Sith Lord, the man who destroyed Sidious with his own hands. Others rally behind Grand Admiral Thrawn, the tactical genius who has returned from the unknown regions with a vision of order that does not rely on the Force. Only the sheer might of strategy and discipline. There is no compromise. Vader's rule is one of fear and absolute power. He does not whisper false promises of democracy or peace. He does not hide behind bureaucracy. He is the Dark Lord of the Sith, and he does not need a Senate or a council to command. The fleets that remain loyal to him know that his will is law, his presence a force that cannot be denied. His followers are zealots, not politicians, officers who believe in the strength of the Sith, stormtroopers who have seen firsthand that Vader's power is unmatched. Where he walks, fleets kneel, worlds burn, and the old ways are reforged in fire. Thrawn is not moved by emotion. He does not fear Vader, nor does he respect him. To Thrawn, the Sith are relics, powerful but undisciplined. They build their empires on passion and arrogance, and passion is unpredictable. Passion is a weakness. Thrawn's empire is not built on the Force, but on flawless precision. His return is not heralded by grand speeches or threats of conquest. He does not demand loyalty. He earns it, slowly, methodically. His officers defect not because they fear him, but because they see the inevitable. This is not a battle of ideals. It is a war of supremacy. Vader strikes first. He cannot allow Thrawn to consolidate his power, to outmaneuver him before the war truly begins. His fleet, still the strongest in the galaxy, sweeps across the outer rim, hunting down Thrawn's growing forces before they can establish a foothold. The battles are brutal, swift, and merciless. But Thrawn does not meet Vader head-on. He does not need to. He lures Vader deeper, stretching his forces thin, drawing him into conflicts that seem winnable, until they aren't. The galaxy watches, silent, waiting. Rebel cells that once saw the fall of Palpatine as a victory now hesitate. Do they fight a divided empire, or do they wait for the dust to settle? Do they hope that the two titans destroy each other, or do they risk aligning with the lesser evil? Luke Skywalker senses the conflict from the shadows, but he does not intervene, not yet. He is not a soldier in this war, not yet. Planets fall, fleets vanish, entire legions are swallowed by Thrawn's traps. But still, Vader does not break. He is not merely a general, he is a force of nature. Where others retreat, he presses forward. Where others fear, he dominates. Thrawn can predict strategy, he can read his enemy's intent, but he cannot control the will of the Force. And so the war rages on, two empires locked in a battle that will decide the fate of the next age. One led by power, the other by intellect, and the galaxy holds its breath, waiting to see who will remain standing when the last ship falls. Luke Skywalker did what no Jedi before him could. He resurrected the Order from nothing, built it from the ashes of war and failure. He sought to restore what had been lost, to honor the legacy of the Jedi that came before him. But the galaxy had changed, and the Jedi he rebuilt were not the Jedi of old. At first, it seemed promising. Young minds eager to learn, drawn from every corner of the galaxy. A temple where the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Luke taught patience, balance, the discipline of the Force without the arrogance of the old ways. He encouraged emotion, understanding that suppression had been the downfall of the Jedi before him. He allowed his students to question, to explore. And yet, the seeds of doubt had already been planted. It started as whispers, discussions in dim-lit chambers, students who trained together but no longer sought their master's wisdom. They did not hate Luke, nor did they seek to betray him, but they questioned the purpose of an order that clung to outdated rules. They looked at history and saw a cycle, one that the Jedi had been doomed to repeat. Why follow a structure that had failed time and time again? Why embrace restraint when the Sith had proven that power was the true path forward? And it was not just the students. The galaxy itself did not trust the return of the Jedi. The scars of war had not healed, and the sight of robed warriors wielding lightsabers did not inspire hope. It reignited old fears. Governments did not want peacekeepers who acted without accountability. The Jedi were an anomaly, a force outside the system, beyond control. And the more Luke tried to guide his students, the more they saw his leadership as a relic of a bygone era. A new movement rose from within. They did not call themselves Jedi, nor did they claim allegiance to the Sith. They believed in the power of the Force, but they rejected the doctrine of restraint. They saw potential in the dark side not as a corrupting influence, but as an untapped source of strength. They argued that emotion was not a weakness, that passion was not the path to destruction, but to true mastery. Luke tried to reason with them. He reminded them of the Sith, of the wars that had been fought and the lives lost to ambition. He told them of Palpatine, of Vader, of the pain that unchecked power had caused. But they did not listen. They did not see Vader as a warning. They saw him as proof that a single Force wielder could reshape the galaxy. It was not war that ended Luke's Jedi Order. There was no great battle, no purge, no massacre. It collapsed from within, crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. The students who remained loyal to Luke left, disillusioned, scattered to the stars. The ones who abandoned the Order vanished, forming their own sects, their own interpretations of the Force. And Luke was left alone, a master with no students, staring at the ruins of what was meant to be a new beginning. There are rumors in the underworld, whispers traded in the darkest corners of Nar Shaddaa, spoken in hushed tones among bounty hunters who know better than to ask questions. A killer moves unseen, striking without warning, leaving no traces but the bodies of the fallen. They are not Sith, not Jedi, not Inquisitor. They have no allegiance, only a purpose: the eradication of all who wield the Force. No one knows their name. Some call them the Phantom Blade, others the Shadow of the Void. But among those who have seen their work, they are known as the Silent Hand. They do not seek power, do not claim dominion, do not fight for ideology. They move with absolute precision, targeting Jedi and Sith alike, cutting down those who once thought themselves untouchable. It begins with the disappearance of lone Force users. Former Jedi hiding in exile, remnants of the Sith who survived the fall of the Empire. Gone. No struggle, no bodies, only silence. Then the deaths begin. A Sith Lord found dead in his fortress, his throat cut so cleanly that his final words never left his lips. A Jedi healer discovered in the Outer Rim, her body untouched, her connection to the Force severed as if by an invisible blade. The assassin does not wield a lightsaber. The elegance of their weapon is in its simplicity. Blades forged from cortosis, impervious to the energy of the Jedi's traditional weapon. They do not announce their presence with the hum of a saber igniting, nor do they leave behind scorched marks of plasma. They strike with precision, never lingering, never leaving a trace of their purpose beyond the fallen. But who trained them? Who commands them? That is the question no one dares ask. The Sith believe they are a rogue Jedi, purging the last of the darkness to prevent another empire. The Jedi fear they are a creation of the Sith, hunting down the last remnants of their kind to ensure their final extinction. Some whisper that they were born from the ashes of Order 66, a clone assassin who never received the order to stand down. Others believe they are something worse, something older. The truth is buried in forgotten archives, hidden in temples long abandoned. Some records speak of an ancient sect, a splinter group from the Jedi Order that vanished before the rise of the Republic. They did not seek balance. They did not seek peace. They believed that the Force itself was a curse, a corruption that had warped the fate of the galaxy for millennia. Their answer was not to control it, but to end it. Now, as Force users begin to vanish, the greatest question remains: who will stop them? The Jedi are scattered, broken, struggling to rebuild after so many wars. The Sith are fractured, consumed by their own rivalries. The balance of the Force has always been defined by conflict. But what happens when the Force itself is being erased from existence? The galaxy thought it was free. They believed Palpatine was dead, his reign shattered in the destruction of the second Death Star. But the dark side is not so easily undone. Shadows linger long after the light has burned them away, and some are patient enough to wait for the right moment to return. Palpatine never intended to die. He did not see the fall of the Empire as a defeat, only a necessary step towards something far greater. He had always planned for betrayal. Vader's redemption, the rebellion's victory, none of it had taken him by surprise. He had foreseen every possible outcome, every branch of destiny the Force could take, and he had prepared. Clones, apprentices, hidden Sith cults, these were all distractions, pieces in a larger puzzle. The truth was far worse. In the depths of the unknown regions, beyond the reach of Jedi or Sith, Palpatine did not simply preserve his life. He transcended it. Through secrets lost to time, forbidden rituals older than the Republic itself, he had begun the process of detaching himself from the physical, not as a mere spirit like those Jedi who found peace in death, not as a wraith clinging to the husk of life, but as something else, something no longer bound by the laws of existence. The Sith sought immortality through unnatural means, but Palpatine had never been a Sith in the way his predecessors had been. He had used the title, used the traditions, but he had always sought something beyond them. The Sith had always been obsessed with power, but power was nothing without permanence. It was not enough to rule. It was not enough to command. He sought to become something greater than the Force itself. For decades, he had let the galaxy believe it had won. The Jedi returned. The Sith fell into obscurity. The Republic was reborn. And through it all, he watched. He listened. He waited. He saw Luke Skywalker's failures, saw the Jedi fracture again and again, saw the endless cycle of war that neither side could escape. The light and dark had never been at war. They had been in balance, an eternal loop doomed to repeat itself forever. And in that cycle he had found his answer. He no longer needed an apprentice. He no longer needed the Sith. The dark side had been a means to an end, and now even it was beneath him. When he returned, it would not be as an emperor, not as a master of the dark side, not as the ruler of a dying empire. He would return as something beyond mortal understanding. The Jedi believed in balance, the Sith in domination, but neither truly understood the Force. Neither could break free from it. Palpatine's vision stretched beyond their limitations. He would become the Force itself, a will without a body, a presence beyond time. Not a god, not a man. Something infinite, something eternal. And now, the galaxy would know the truth. The Sith should have died with Palpatine. Their rule should have ended when Vader turned against his master. The galaxy believed the darkness had finally been extinguished, that the cycle had broken. But the Sith were never bound to one man. They were not a single empire, a single dynasty. The darkness had always known how to survive. There was one left. Not an apprentice, not a mere shadow of the Sith's former glory. A true Sith Lord, hidden since the fall of Korriban, waiting for the moment when both Jedi and Sith had exhausted themselves in their endless war. Unlike Sidious, they had no interest in ruling the galaxy. Unlike Vader, they did not seek redemption or revenge. Their purpose was singular, absolute, the eradication of the Jedi, not as an enemy, but as a mistake that should have never existed. They had no name, no legend that echoed across the stars. Their existence had been erased long before the Clone Wars, buried by the Jedi Order itself. But while history had forgotten them, the Force had not. The echoes of their will remained in the old Sith tombs, in the dark places of the galaxy, where the Force whispered its secrets to those willing to listen. While Palpatine built an empire and Darth Bane established the rule of two, this Sith watched from the depths. They did not seek to control from the shadows, nor did they waste their time on the politics of conquest. Their belief was far older, more ruthless than the Sith Lords of the Republic era. The Jedi and the Sith were both aberrations, corruptions of the Force. The light and dark should never have been separate. There should only have been power, and the Jedi, in their arrogance, had tried to deny it. For years they waited, knowing the Jedi would always rebuild, knowing the cycle of balance and imbalance would continue. But when Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order collapsed, when the galaxy turned against the Force itself, they knew their time had come. They did not strike with an army. They did not reveal themselves in a grand proclamation of the Sith's return. That had always been the mistake of their predecessors. Instead, they hunted. One by one, the remaining Jedi began to disappear, not fallen in battle, not cut down in war, but erased, removed from existence with a precision that defied even the most skilled assassins. No trace, no bodies, no echoes in the Force. The Jedi who had survived the fall of Luke's temple, those who had scattered into hiding, those who still clung to the remnants of the old order, they all vanished, their connection to the Force severed in ways that no one understood. The Sith had never needed numbers to win. They had never needed fleets or empires. The Jedi had always believed themselves to be the guardians of peace, the defenders of the Force. But how could they defend something they no longer understood? The last Sith Lord did not seek to rule. They did not seek to bring back the Sith Order. They sought only one thing: finality, true extinction. The end of the Jedi, not as warriors, not as an order, but as a concept. No more prophecies, no more chosen ones, no more endless war between light and dark. The galaxy would never see them coming. The war between light and dark has stretched across centuries, a cycle so deeply ingrained that it feels as natural as the stars in the sky. Jedi rise, Sith return, and the galaxy bends under the weight of their struggle. The Force has always been a battleground, wielded, bent, manipulated to fit the ideals of those who seek to control it. But what if the Force itself has had enough? The galaxy does not notice at first. The remnants of the Jedi are still in hiding, scattered and broken. The Sith are extinct, or so it is believed. The great empires of the past have collapsed, leaving only fractured factions to fight over the ruins. It should be a time of recovery, of rebuilding. Yet something is different. The Force begins to change. It moves in ways no one understands, in ways no Jedi or Sith have ever predicted. At first it is subtle, whispers across the stars, disturbances that ripple through even those untrained in its ways. Then, the impossible begins. Those who once wielded the Force find it slipping from their grasp, as if the very energy they relied upon is rejecting them. Lightsabers refuse to ignite. Precognition falters. Healers watch in horror as their abilities cease to function. The Force is still present, but it no longer answers them. In its place, something new emerges. Not an individual, not a prophecy-given form, but an entity unlike any before. It is neither Jedi nor Sith, neither light nor dark. It is the Force itself, no longer content to be shackled by the orders that have fought to define it. It takes no name, wears no face, yet its presence is undeniable. Across the galaxy, Force-sensitive individuals experience the same vision, an endless void where the Force itself speaks. It does not whisper, it does not command, it states a single truth: the war is over. The Force will no longer be bound by those who seek to control it. Panic spreads among those who once wielded its power. Jedi fear their connection has been severed forever. Former Sith, lurking in the shadows, realize their ambitions mean nothing without the Force to fuel them. Even those who never trained in its ways but carried its potential feel the shift. The very laws of the galaxy are rewriting themselves. And then it happens. The oldest temples crumble, their secrets no longer hidden but erased. Sith artifacts turn to dust, their dark power stripped away. The holocrons, the teachings, the histories that have kept the war alive for millennia, gone. The Force reclaims what was always its own. Some see this as salvation, others as the final death of all they have ever known. There are no more Jedi, no more Sith, no more chosen ones to rise and restore balance. For the first time in the history of the galaxy, there is only the Force, unbound, untamed, free. And in that freedom, a question remains. If the Force no longer serves the will of those who wield it, what comes next? The galaxy is old. Civilizations have risen, burned, and faded into the forgotten corners of history. Wars have been fought, empires forged and shattered. The Force, eternal and vast, has been wielded, misunderstood, and worshipped. Yet through it all, one truth remains unshaken: nothing lasts forever. No Jedi Order, no Sith dominion, no empire, no rebellion, no war that has ever been waged has stood against the endless passage of time. The Force has spoken. Its will is no longer bound to the endless cycles of light and dark. There are no more Jedi to uphold ancient teachings, no Sith left to hunger for dominance. The great figures of the past, Skywalker, Kenobi, Sidious, Vader, are dust, their legacies myths told by those who still remember. But the stars do not weep for them. They shine on, indifferent to the struggles of mortals. And yet, the galaxy is never silent. It has not fallen into stillness. It shifts, reshapes, grows. New leaders rise, though none claim the mantle of Jedi or Sith. Some wield the Force, but not as warriors or prophets. They do not serve the doctrines of the past. The Force is no longer something to be owned, no longer a weapon or a path to power. It is something greater, something untouched by the arrogance of those who once fought over its meaning. It does not whisper of balance, does not demand servitude. It moves as it always has, flowing through all things, connecting the seen and unseen. The galaxy has learned its lesson. The wars that once defined it have faded into history, cautionary tales for those who would seek to repeat them. Power, no matter how absolute, is never permanent. The greatest warriors, the wisest rulers, all have fallen. The Sith sought domination and were erased. The Jedi sought order and found only ruin. Every great vision of the past was swallowed by the future. Yet, even now, the story continues. Somewhere in the Outer Rim, A smuggler haggles for cargo, unaware that his child carries a spark of the Force. In the ruins of a forgotten temple, an explorer unearths a relic, its purpose long lost, but its presence undeniable. On a distant moon, a soldier feels a pull in his mind, something guiding him away from battle, whispering of a path not yet walked. The Force does not rest. It does not end. There are no prophecies left to be fulfilled, no chosen ones to rise and fall, no ancient texts to dictate the future. The Force no longer bends to the will of a single doctrine. It has outgrown the names given to it, the structures built around it. Jedi, Sith, these were mortal interpretations of something eternal, something that existed before the first lightsaber was ever ignited and will endure long after the last one is extinguished. The galaxy is moving forward, but the echoes of the past remain. Some will cling to the legends, trying to rebuild what was lost, believing that history can be reclaimed. But the Force does not look back. It does not repeat itself.